that we've done. We'll be presenting a few highlights of that report in a minute. This is a waiting area with the speakers online. We'll have a chat with each other, but we are not starting the formal webinar. We'll be presenting a few highlights of that report in a minute. Four minutes to start, everyone. Please have patience. Thank you for joining us today. And just to get the conversation going as we start, Lu Ying, I'm hoping you've got some gossip for us, but I always hope for gossip about any conversations you're having. Please do let anyone know about any other sovereigns that are coming up. We know, for example, that HSB has won the mandate to support the UK gilt, which is fantastic news. Feel free to mention anything that you know about that, or I will at least. So HSB will be one of the two lead arranging banks working on the UK sovereign bond issuance, which is expected to be issued later this year. And the UK has already indicated they're looking at a roughly 10 billion sterling program, which is fantastic. Similar size to the German program. And then, of course, the interest on the part of the UK government is exciting interest in many other countries. We have lots of other countries looking at this now. The question being, of course, who will come to market first and whether we'll see fresh issuance from the other parties in the meantime, because, of course, I'm always looking to see how big we can make this market in 2021. We've had more than $269 billion of issuance globally in the green bond market, and more than that in the social bond and the other daughters of the green bond. It's pretty exciting, but we're expecting a lot more in 2021, especially supported by sovereign issuance, hence the need of this webinar today. But I haven't started formally yet. That was just a teaser. For those listeners on YouTube, thank you for joining us now. We'll be starting the formal webinar in about a minute's time. People are still dialing in, but you're in the right place. This is the Climate Bonds webinar on sovereign, green, social, and sustainability bonds. For those of you joining afresh in Zoom, you will have the option of listening in either English or Chinese at the bottom of your screen. Please note the button for translations. If you want to ask a question, you can actually ask this question in the Q&A button. We will answer in text. Our Climate Bonds team will answer questions that come up, and I will probably pick a couple of questions to put to our esteemed panel. So, Louisa, what's your view? Do we have enough people logged on of those that have said? Let me know when you think a good moment is to start formally.
Okay, so on my end, we have about 50 people, 50 participants. I think you're good to start, and then we'll have a few more joining in the next 5 minutes or so.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's get going. Folks, my name is Sean Kidney. I'm the CEO of the Climate Bonds Initiative. We're a global NGO working to mobilize capital for climate change and environmental solutions. We have worked in China for many years now to grow a large green bond market, which has been actively supported by the regulators in the bond market and by the Chinese government. It's one of the great successes of green finance of the past few years. I mean, of course, there are other components. The green loan market in China is huge. In the region, we've seen green bonds and green loans in Korea, in Japan, in Vietnam, in ASEAN, in India. But globally, we've now seen last year more than $269 billion of green bonds issued. And we've seen bonds issued, which we call the daughters of green bonds, social bonds, sustainability bonds, blue bonds even, resilience bonds, in the same format as green bonds, where the proceeds are allocated to certain environmentally important investments and there's annual reporting or quarterly reporting, grow hugely. We have about $1.5 or $1.6 trillion, depending on how you count it, of outstanding bonds in this market now. Still small compared to the global outstanding bonds of about $100 trillion, but growing very, very fast. Despite the pandemic, in the last year, we've had a tough year. That is still an experience being felt in Western Europe and North America and other countries where the pandemic continues to range. In China, in Korea, in Vietnam, in Australia, where I am temporarily, the pandemic is under control. Our economies have started to revive. We're doing well. We need to get the pandemic under control in other countries so we can rebuild the global economy. But we've learned something else, that when we have a crisis like that, as we know in Chinese, a crisis is an opportunity. And governments have learnt around the world to start thinking about how to make the most of this opportunity to build back better, in the words of the managing director of the International Monetary Fund. So we have seen major measures in Europe to ensure that the recovery addresses resilience of economies and addresses a green economy, with a €750 billion recovery and resilience fund and many policies. In China, equally, with the new infrastructure fund and many other measures that the government is taking, we see a very clear push to green the economy and make it more sustainable, to back up the commitments by President Xi Jinping of carbon neutrality by 2060 and intermediate targets. It's not only these two giant economies of the world, China and Europe, it's also the economies of Japan, Korea. 110 countries, in fact, have made commitments now to carbon neutrality or zero net carbon futures by the middle of the century. And the Biden administration, the new president of the United States, promising an era of collaboration and cooperation rather than open fighting, has also said very clearly that it is committed to very strong climate targets. We are, of course, hoping that they will replicate the same promises made by Europe and Japan, and we expect that to happen based on the policy soundings coming out of Washington, D.C. This is a new era. In the last year, things have changed a lot. Of course, we still have to figure out how to do this. We have a big challenge. We're making progress thanks to massive purchasing of solar and wind by China. The price continues to drop dramatically for the rest of the world. On energy, we are slowly winning. On electric vehicles, we are slowly winning. The car fleet will shift in the next 10 years dramatically, thanks to work in countries like Norway, to Tesla, and of course, to Chinese government policy around ensuring the fleet shifts to electric. But of course, there's a lot more to be done. One of the features of financing this transition has been the green bond market, the green loan market, the sustainability linked bond market, and so on. Sovereign bonds have been a big part of this. Today, we're having a discussion around sovereign green bonds to support a report that the Climate Bonds Initiative has just released for your benefit, available free from our website. Our website is www.climatebonds.net. Please go, download the report and many other reports we have available to you. Thank you very much for joining us today. We have with us eminent speakers. We have first Lu Yinggan, who's head of sustainable bonds, debt capital markets, Asia Pacific for HSBC, the global investment and retail bank. We also have Keng Xiangrong, who's the Asia Pacific head of fixed income for State Street Global Advisors, one of the largest investors on the planet. We have Christine Zhang, or Ting Zhang, who's Vice President of International Business Department of CCXI, the #1 credit rating agency in China. Well, they're certainly #1 in my eyes. And then we have Dr. Gu Zhonan, who's the Deputy Secretary General of the China Green Finance Committee that has been at the center of the green finance recommendations and reforms in China for the last 5 years and continues to influence the direction of thinking in that country. Before I turn to our esteemed panel, I'd like to ask Xi Wenhong, who's in Beijing, to give us a little bit of an introduction to the report. Wenhong, over to you. You're on mute, Wenhong.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thanks, Sean, for the introduction. I'll probably give the presentation in Chinese because we're facing a large Chinese audience. So for those of you who does not speak Chinese, welcome to use the interpretation. 首先非常感谢Sean的介绍，我是气候债券倡议组织中国区的谢文宏，平时是在北京，非常荣幸今天能有机会在各位专家开始很精彩的分享和讨论之前，先拿几分钟的时间来简要介绍一下我们这一份报告，这份绿色社会和可持续主权债券报告的一些起草的背景和主要的发现。为此呢，我准备了一个简单的 PPT， 让我来分享一下屏幕。这个中文的报告呢，也会在会后我们会上传到我们的网站上，所以欢迎大家到时候参考。首先，我就说一下什么是主权债券吧，因为其实我们在发布这个报告和这个活动的预告的时候，就有很多人会在问，简单来说呢，主权债券这个概念在英文里面 sovereign bond 是指政府支持的机构，主要是一些各国政府的财政部门为了去募集资金，以政府的名义去发行和背书的债券，他们的发行主体是政府。在中国呢，主权债券主要是分为中央政府发行的中央主权债和地方政府发行的地方主权债。为什么我们要专门去写一篇这一篇关于贴标绿色社会和可持续主权债券的报告呢？我在这个 slide 里面提出了几个就是最主要的一些点。那简单来说呢，就是第一个原因是因为目前的资本市场上，主权债券的影响力是非常巨大的。在常规的主权债券的市场，大概占了全球的流通的债券的近半数。现在可能全球的主权债券市场存量大概我们估计是45万亿美元，其中即使有10%到20%的发行，是专门应用于绿色项目的话，对整个绿色投融资的影响都是非常巨大的。第二呢，就是主权债券的发行人一般都是政府部门，这些部门呢，有决定公共预算 和整个国家的资源配置的一些最终的权利。他们也拥有改变绿色社会和可持续债券整个一个市场的最终的决策权，就是他们可以在源头提供更多的一些活水。同时呢，对这些主权发行人、这些政府来说，绿色和社会的主权债券发行，它本身就是一个提供公共物品、公共产品的一个手段它也可以通过这个来内化一些负外部性，这些我们就是在说气候金融或绿色金融的时候经常提到的，去吸引推动更多的可持续发展所需的一些投资。然后也可以以市场手段去推动实现很多国家层面，甚至是超主权层面的一些宏观的目标，比如说国家自主贡献 NDC 或者 SDG 这些目标这也使得贴标主权债对很多政府来说非常有吸引力。最后一点呢，就是我们预期在后疫情的时期的经济恢复，很多都会由政府来主导这些经济刺激政策应该会优先去考虑社会和绿色的项目支出。避免去走以前的一些模式贴标主权债呢，对包括在中国以内的很多发展中国家和发达国家都是一个很主要的工具。刚才香也提到，就在中国2060碳中和这些目标的提出中的背景下，这是一个非常好的机会来做就是关于绿色主权债的发行的一些研究和推动。那么这是我们在我们这份报告的一些基本的一个撰写的一些过程和设计。现在截至2020年11月，就是全球其实有22个国家的政府已经发行了总面值为960亿美元的贴标主权债。我们呢就是对其中22个发行人中的19家进行了问卷的访谈。这些发行人其实涵盖了绝大部分全球已经发行的贴标的发行的主权债券里面包括了8个发达国家，就比如法国、比利时、卢森堡这样的国家，和11个发展中国家，其中又包括了泰国、印尼、尼日利亚，包括塞舌尔这样的小国家。可以说这个问卷结果是比较有代表性的其中另外有3个国家，危地马拉和厄瓜多尔是发行了社会债券然后韩国是另外的一个国家是发行的可持续债券这3个国家没有在我们的访谈人的名单里面，但是其实还是有主权的社会债券的发行的。然后这一章呢是我们报告的一些非常简单的一些主要的发现主要是针对我们对发行人访谈的一些反馈做的一些总结。感兴趣的读者可以去参考一些具体的报告和一些具体的数据。主要来说呢，就是首先是关于就是主权债的一些意义和一些为什么他们要发行主权债对大多数国家来说呢，发行主权债的主要动因是去推动当地的绿色债券市场的发展比如说主权发行人可以作为其他类型发行的效仿和表率为投资者提供一些安全性和流动性较高的投资机会然后也可以让资金从其他评级较低的或者是流动性较差的债券里面释放出来第二条呢，就是我刚刚提到的为更全面的一些 SDG NDC 这些战略性的倡议发挥作用我们的问卷其实也发现了，就是对这些国家来说应对气候变化是主要的一个发行的动机第3个呢，就是增加整个的一个框架的透明度，因为发行贴标绿色主权债的过程，其实通常需要进行一些特定的预算标定，我们英文叫 budget tagging并且会承诺公开收益的分配和它的影响报告，这些审计方面的要求其实大大提高了对政府各部门还有议会这些立法程序的透明度，然后对投资者来说也是一个更多的利好和一些信息和充分的知情权。这个在右边的这一张图里面就有各个国家访谈人里面对于这些因素的一些考虑。然后根据我们的访谈的话，我们其实在这里面简单的列出了就发行过程中一些比较关键的环节和需要注意的一些事项右边是一些就是发行的时候一些最主要的一些发行的过程，比如说得到政府的批准建立一个主权债券的工作组选择符合条件的支出项，包括确定一些合适的项目。然后在左边呢，就是针对这19家发行人的访谈，他们的一些主要的建议。其中有一些，比如说你在对投资项目的选择的时候，要选择一些就是非常受关注比较高的有积极效益的一些项目。然后在发行后的报告的选择方面，也需要提前去确定它的频率和性质以更好的向公众和投资人去披露。最后呢，我们在报告里面其实也用了 将近10多页的篇幅吧，详细的去分析不同的市场和发行人的发行决策的过程，募集资金的使用，包括就是这些债券的期限，包括投资者的一些偏好。但是因为时间关系，我可能不在这儿多讲了，我就很快的在这一章很快的总结一下，就是关于这些发行的债券的定价和认购的情况。在这张图里面大家可以看到，就是相同发行人的贴标主权债券和此前3笔的常规债券的认购倍数平均值的一个对比，可以看到就是在认购倍数方面的话，贴标主权债券是要比普通的债券会更高的。另外的话，就是在现在发行的32只贴标主权债里面，有大概23只是建议的收益率的趋险，然后其中有4只是表现出正常的新发行溢价，9只是表现出绿色溢价，然后10只是在现有的收益曲线内定价，所以在定价方面还是有一定的优势的。最后呢，就是因为时间不多，最后呢就是对贴标主权债券这个行业这个领域未来的一个展望。大家可以看到，就是不管是按照经合组织还是 IEA 这些机构的估算，未来绿色基础设施投资还有所需的年度投资都存在一个很巨大的缺口。然后贴标主权债券将是撬动这个市场，为这部分项目去提供融资的一个非常有力的工具。但是根据我们现在的数据的一个估算和分析，目前的发行的数量还是只占了一个零头，就在158名已经发行了主权债的国家里面，只有22个发行了贴标的主权债券，然后总额上面也是一个非常小的杯水车薪。目前市场也在一个比较初步的一个起步的阶段，所以我们也很期待能够通过这一次报告，包括相关的一些讨论，来积极推动很多别的国家，包括中国的入场。希望这个领域会接下来还有更好的蓬勃的发展。我就先说这些，谢谢。Back to you, Sean. You're on mute.
Fantastic, Gwen Hong. Thank you so much for taking us through. Let's turn the PowerPoint off now if we can and get our speakers back in full Technicolor. Thank you so much. I've introduced our speakers before. We'll go one by one. Lu Ying, as initial roundup. Lu Ying, can I ask you to start, please? What are your thoughts on the green bond market? And I especially want to tell our audience that HSBC brought to the market the very first green sovereign bond of the world, which was from Poland, and has been given a mandate as an arranger for the UK green bonds. They've got a lot of experience in this area. Lu Ying, over to you. Thoughts and reflections.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Sean. Now you actually switch to Mandarin channel as well. 好，大家好，我叫甘露颖，我是汇丰亚太区可持续发展债券的主管。今天很高兴可以借此机会和大家更新一下这个可持续发展债券市场的最新的发展。像 Sean 刚才提到的，在这个主权方面的可持续发展债券呢，真的是发展的很快。我们看到英美都有很多主权国家在这个里面有很多的举措，但其实我们亚洲在这方面也是发展的非常的好的。那大家可能留意到，全球的绿色和可持续发展债券市场是持续的增长的。2020年呢，这个市场的总量的发行量呢是5700亿美元，而这个市场呢每年呢都以大概是65%左右的速度增长。踏入2021年呢，这个1月份的发行量就1个月就达到了900亿美元，是去年1月份发行量的2.6倍。如果只看亚太地区发行人的话呢，发行量呢是增加了3.3倍。那我们今天主要关注的是主权和政府类的发行人，就说以前这个市场基本上是欧美所占据的。刚才 Sean 也提到，这个英国准备发行绿色债券，我们也知道一些拉丁美洲的国家也在计划当中。那在亚洲的话呢，已经有4个政府发行过绿色或可持续发展债券了，它包括中国、香港特区、印尼、韩国和泰国。就在2周以前呢，咱们中国香港特区政府就发行了30亿美元10年期和30年期的绿色债券，这是至今为止最大的以美元计价的政府绿债，也是亚洲最长年期的绿债之一。所以我们从一个可能是后来者的一个角度看了，我们正在慢慢的领先于这个市场。 那在2020年呢，在新冠疫情的影响下，那我们的生活都有了很大的变化，可持续发展金融的领域呢，也有了不少新的发展。除了刚才我们谈到的绿色债券，我们还看到了转型债券。募集资金是用于支持从高碳到低碳的转型。除了这些对募集资金有要求的绿色债券、转型债券、社会债券以外，在现在的市场上呢，也出现了一种对募集资金并没有使用的要求，但是债券的票息呢和发行人的可持续发展表现相关的债券，它呢叫做 Sustainability Linked Bond， 我们叫它 SLB。例如现在正在路演的一位印度水泥行业的发行人，他正考虑发行一笔10年期的债券。如果在2030年这个发行人没有达到既定的节碳减排目标，那这个债券的票息呢将会跳升75个基点，是不是一个非常 interesting 的一个架构，对不对？那我们觉得，所以我们从市场，无论从银行还是发行人的角度，我们都看到了很多正面的发展因素。当然我们可能也会有一些需要注意的问题和市场觉得的一些难点。那今天呢，我也希望在这里和各位嘉宾、各位专家和各位在绿色金融非常有兴趣的老朋友一起讨论一下今后的发展。那我先把时间交回给 Sean， 然后到我们下一位那个投资人的发行人，他对我们在整个绿债市场的发展是非常非常的重要的，因为他是金主啊。我先回到 Sean。
Thank you, Luying. King Xian, I think that's a cue to you. The next speaker is very important to the development of the market, she's saying. As we know, the investor is. This is a market driven by investors in terms of demand, which has led to the growth of it. Tell us a bit more about the perspective of State Street Global and the sort of where you think this has got to go.
Right. Thanks, Sean, and good afternoon, everyone. State Street Global Advisors, as Sean pointed out, is one of the largest asset managers in the world. And we have institutional clients telling us very clearly, very strong message to us that they want to be actively involved in green bond investing or ESG investing. Now, while this trend has started quite a number of years ago, what we have experienced over the last few years was that the outstanding number of bonds in the green bond areas are still very low. Now, as a result, our investors are continuing asking us to try new ways how we can help them achieve that objective. They have started with principally, as Sean mentioned, in the developed markets, they have started to issue green bonds, so they led the way. And increasingly, they are moving out of the developed markets and looking at emerging markets as well. And so Asia would be also a natural destination whereby they are looking for bonds issued by the Asian issuers, be it sovereign as well as corporates. And I think that looking at the trajectory of developments in the green bonds in Asia, it holds promising prospects for us to try to achieve what our client needs. And this is really something that we do not see that as a short-term trend. It is a long-term trend and here to stay. Now, as a result, we feel very encouraged that issuers, which has come into the market, as well as those that are watching, continues to express the interest and intention to be issuing green bonds in this area. In terms of what our investors are looking at, they are looking at across the yield curve. So it could be a shorter dated bonds like 5-year, intermediate up to 10 years, 20 and 30 in the long end. So really clearly we have real interest in the bond maturities across the whole yield curve. And we hope that the frequent issuance of issuers will create the benchmark yield curves, which will be critical for us to try to encourage more investors getting into this space. And I think having sovereign issues coming into the market will be a good catalyst to try to lead the way for other issuers to follow suit.
And of course, that's the key reason, the number one reason why issuers in the sovereign space are issuing, as they've told us in the survey. They've said that catalyzing or growing or supporting the growth of a green bond market is the primary reason that they're issuing globally. And in fact, some issuers, like the French government with their sovereign issuance program, when they came to market, specifically chose tenors that they felt needed benchmark price support in the market to try and grow that particular kind of tenor. This is very sensible policy making on the part of debt management officers around the world. And the German government did the same kind of thing in their thinking. So I think they're already listening to you, King Xiang, and hopefully they'll listen to you much more going forward. Can I now ask Christine to come in from CCXI, the Chinese credit rating agency, and give us your perspective on the opportunities here and what you think is going on.
Thank you, Sean. So next I will speak Chinese. 首先呢，非常高兴有机会参加这个线上讨论。那么是国内的最大的机构那么我们一直以来呢是覆盖70家产品种，同时呢，我们也为跨境发行的这个熊猫以及其中像欧版的中国的主权国家，另外像新开发银行都是我们的客户。所以我们觉得其实现在发布的报告不仅非常详实、非常及时，同时我们也觉得呢，它给其他国家来发行相关的这个 GSS fund 其实提供了一个非常强。那么我想今天做这个线上发布，在中国做这个发布呢，可能主要的目的还是想来推动政府有机发行这样的绿色可持续债券。那么从我们的角度来看呢，中国的主权债一直市场上都是非常具有这个竞争力的，无论是从安全来讲，还是从流动性来，还是从收益率来讲。那么所以我觉得在中国来讲，前提是一个非常好的时机来考虑发行的贴标主权债券。在实际发行过程当中，我们觉得来自政府方面的驱动意义就是要大于从现实操作方面所面临的困难。那么这个是第一个点。第二个点，我们认为中国政府呢可以推动利用国内债券市场来推动“一带一路”沿线的这个绿色可持续发展。那么也就是推动“一带一路”沿线的国家和企业在中国国内发行人民币也就是绿色熊猫债。那么接下来我希望在后面的讨论当中跟大家具体讨论相关的具体内容。好，谢谢。
Thanks, Chris. Thank you so much, Christine. And thanks for all the work that CCXI has been doing to grow the Chinese credit bond market. What people may not realize is that CCXI also has a green bond verifier second opinion division that has supported a lot of the issuance in the Chinese market, which is now the world's second largest green bond market on climate bonds figures. And now I would like to go to my great friend, Dr. Guozhun An, or An Guozhun, who is phoning in from Beijing, who has a long history working in financial markets, Ministry of Finance, and most importantly, over the last few years on the Green Finance Committee, which has driven the development of green finance measures, I would argue, in the Chinese market. Guozhun, please, over to you for your remarks.
Okay, can you hear me, sir?
Yes, beautifully. Please feel free to speak in Chinese.
Okay, congratulations for the solving green and social and sustainability bond survey. Thank you so much. I can transfer in China in Chinese. Okay. 感谢 Shane， 非常感谢，在我们的“十四五”的开年之际就是今年的新年，然后呢 ，CBI 公布这个绿色主权可持续发展的这个债券的研究。那么我相信它对于中国的这个绿色债券市场发展以及中国的这种绿色主权债券市场的发展，一定会起到非常前瞻性的借鉴意义。我们其实知道。近年来呢，中国就是非常注重这个生态文明建设和绿色发展。那么，绿色债券、绿色基金、绿色保险这些金融工具得到了快速的发展。在2020年9月，习总书记参加联合国会议的时候，提出了3060碳达峰和碳中和的这样的发展的框架，来推动疫情后的世界经济的绿色复苏。汇聚起这个可持续发展的这样的一个强大合力，那么也体现了中国 这个绿色低碳发展道路的决心，为老百姓提供一个健康的、安全、舒适的生活环境。实际上呢，我们认为呢，其实这个3060目标呢，对于绿色发展，推动着应对气候变化、国家治理气候体系的完善，以及为绿色低碳发展提供了一个制度的一个顶层框架的一个设计。那么实际上我们可以看到，就是说目前呢，中国就是绿色金融的这个框架顶层设计，怎么样实现市场创新和地方实践的有效的衔接。那么截止到2020年6月呢，中国的绿色信贷余额已经超过了11万亿，那么是位居世界第一。那么绿色债券的存量呢，约1.2万亿人民币，世界第二。那么其实上，易行长也多次强调，就是绿色金融发展的5大领域，包括绿色金融标准体系、金融机构监管和信息披露制度、政策激励约束机制、绿色产品创新和市场体系，以及绿色金融的国际合作。那么我们可以看到，在这个绿色金融创新里面呢，绿色债券市场其实发挥了一个主旋律的作用啊。在去年呢，人民行修订了绿色债券支持项目目录，那么它增加了这个气候友好型项目，也考虑出台相关的政策，为发行人或者投资人提供税收的优惠，包括建立征信和审批的快速通道，那么出台境外人民币离岸市场发行的相关配套制度等等，那么加强这个我们说货币当局、离岸市场和金融机构之间的合作，那么推动这种政府间互认绿色债券标准的国际合作，那么推动这个债券市场、绿色债券市场的定价机制、流动性和全球在节能环保领域的合作。另外呢，特别重要的一点呢，就是发展就是地方的，就是无论是绿色市政债市场以及中央层面的绿色主权政府债券市场。那么其中重要的一点就是培育多元化的绿色投资者，那么包括养老金、社保基金、保险、金融机构、国外资本、政府基金和社会公益基金这样的多元化投资主体，那么培育这个绿色投资者网络体系的建设，推进绿色资产的交易平台。那么还有一点，就是商业银行投贷联动，包括目前呢，中国政府在商业银行投资股权基金上又有了新的一个创新，对于整个的绿色股权投资市场发展都是有非常大的推动。那么其实SAN它是国际的专家，我们可以看到，在2019年出台的年底出台的欧洲绿色新政中呢，欧委会提出了行动路线图和所需的投资和可用的融资工具。包括欧盟也增大了清洁能源投资和碳排放交易。那么2050年呢，德国有望实现零排放。那么从全球来看呢，就是低碳和社会兼容的绿色经济也会作为持续发展的绿色低碳城市发展的动力。那么我们认为呢，其实我从前年开始在做就是政府投资改革创新的研究，包括地方债市场的改革创新的研究。那么我们也希望呢，就是在今年呢，就是地方政府债券市场有所创新吧。去年我们也是跟来自于联合知信以及江西的它作为绿色金融改革的实验区，也合作了关于绿色市政债的这样的研究。那么也邀请到了文宏来参加我们的研究。我们也希望呢，在今年开展的碳中和目标下的政府投融资改革以及地方绿色政府债券市场的发展方面，能够跟SAN建立这样的和各位专家建立一个这样的一个合作关系。那么我们可以看到，2020年在疫情冲击之下呢，就是中国重启了叫专项就是特别国债，并且增加了专项债券发行的决定。那么实际上专项债券呢，到2020年2月21日呢，它的累计新增专项发行额是8026.6亿人民币。那么建议呢，未来的绿色低碳发展的地方政府投融资的方向呢，就更多的去关注强调绿色投资和生态环境保护，包括这个绿色建筑、绿色交通和绿色城市的发展。那么以绿色的投资有效推动经济增长和可持续发展。 那么绿色市政债呢，也会作为一个非常新型的债务融资工具，对于绿色金融改革以及生态文明改革试验区的建设，起到包括气候投资的这样的投资试点城市的建设起到非常好的作用。无论是绿色主权债券市场还是气候债券，我相信呢，它对于中国未来的发展一定会提供非常有效的这个政府投资改革的创新的机制。那么实际上，中国2060年这个碳中和为中国经济的转型提供了一个远期目标，对于气候投资、绿色发展、生态环境保护也带来了一些机遇和挑战。我们也希望呢，能够就是地方层面和中央政府层面呢，能够结合这个区域发展的特点，包括产业情况、绿色低碳发展、区位和技术，对我们未来的这个实施方案和路线图进行统筹的规划。对于绿色低碳城市的发展的投融资和绿色主权债券市场和绿色市政债市场这样的一些创新，能够提供一个非常好的一个路线图。我也特别期待呢，Shane您带领的团队和我们在座的包括 SIBC 这样的专家以及我们的市场参与者，能够更多的为我们就是绿色债券市场还有主权债券市场的创新，能够提供你们的智慧和真知灼见，一同叫中国有句俗话叫众人摇桨开大船。我也希望呢，在今年我们能够在这方面有所创新，有所突破。为了绿水青山，为了我们的美丽的这样的一个就是中国的一个实现，或者是全球的一个绿色发展，奉献一份力量。谢谢Shane，非常感谢。
A good poetic finish. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a lot to do in China. We've made enormous strides with lifting 1 billion people out of poverty and many other things over the last 30 to 40 years. But of course, we have environmental challenges, not just clean air and clean water that we now need to dramatically improve, but also climate change and to deliver on Xi Jinping's vision for China's leadership role on climate change around the world. As we've seen, we, along, I think I can speak from our partners, and I can certainly speak from HSBC, who have someone we worked with very closely in the past, are committed to supporting China's transition to become a green, clean economy. There's stuff to be done. I want to say, the railway industry, the fast trains in China are so exciting when you compare them to the fast trains in the rest of the world, the lack of fast trains in the rest of the world. I'm saying that because I'm trying to say to the Chinese authorities, please bring China Rail to market as a green bond issuer. Every single bond there should be a green bond. We can bring in a big lump, bring the figures up and really showcase the rail system in China as it needs to be to the rest of the world as an example of what the future needs to look like. And Christine, I don't know whether you've been to New York and Washington, D.C., but I'm going to tell you, traveling by rail between Boston and Washington, D.C. is depressing after you've been on the Shanghai-Beijing high-speed rail. Many other things in China. The question will be, will we see China, an interesting question, will we see China come to market with sovereign green bonds as well as part of flying the flag of leadership in this particular area? That's the question going forward. But Lu Ying, what do you think of the prospects in this area? Do you think we can expect to see more provincial green bond issuance, noting what Guojun said about the interest there, national interest? What's it look like to you?
Yeah. 像我觉得您说的很对，我们中国在这个市场上面已经有了相当大的一个影响力，那我们也希望以后继续能够在这个气候研究和气候政策上面继续带领大家，或者是带领亚洲的国家继续去前进。那我觉得在中国的政府债券和主权债券这方面的发展空间，像您说的是很大的，因为很多地方政府他们需要融资，所以我们也希望有更多的地方政府参与到这个绿色债券的这个 game 来，然后让大家特别有很多地方的企业有很多地方的金融机构，他们能跟随政府的步伐，然后可以参与到绿色金融里面来。 就像咱们的报告里面说到，其实很多很多政府和主权国家为什么他们发行绿色债券，他们是为了培育市场，他们为了在一个很好的一个标准，然后让大家去 follow。但我感觉除了绿色这个纯绿这个标签之外，像您说的，其实我们现在这个环境有很多方面的挑战我们除了需要绿色的项目，我们需要风光水的可再生能源，我们需要清洁交通，我们同样需要有很多资金去投向这个转型项目。那然后让一些可能跟燃气、可能跟一些高污染行业相关的一些，但是也非常需要资源的一些项目能得到这个融资。那所以我感觉，而且中国作为一个发展中国家，我们从这方面要走的要很多，我们不可能一夜之间就 switch 到 renewable energy。所以我觉得我们更希望的是中国政府我们能发行绿色主权债，然后去引领这个方面的发展。我们也希望像安博士说的，各个政府机构，还有一些科研机构，还有我们听众上面的嘉宾和专家，我们能够一同发展我们在这个转型的路径，就是怎么样能够从今天达到2030碳达峰、2060碳中和的一个节碳减排的这个路径。其实这个路径呢，对于很多企业和金融机构的发行人都是极其需要的，就特别是一些在相对高污染、高能耗的行业，就例如钢铁、例如水泥这些行业，他们急需一个国家也需要一个sector 的一些 pathway， 然后去 guide 他们做这个进一步的一个发展。那汇丰我们作为绿色金融方面走得比较前的一个金融机构，我们也很希望我们能够把国际上面的讨论、国际上面的经验，还有国际投资人对这方面的了解和看法，然后呢就带到跟中国的专家一起分享、一起研究，然后我们看看怎么样把这个转型的这一仗打好。因为转型现在是一个非常非常重要的 topic， 我们不能只看这些非常纯绿的东西，它是我们重要的一部分，但转型也是很重要的一部分。
Transition is really important. That's exactly right. I mean, of course, we have a particular opportunity right now because the Chinese economy has got going again and the European and North American economy hasn't. There are some very attractive investment opportunities. And we already see a bit of an improvement of capital flows into China. And those investors want green. Christine, you've been outspoken in the past of calling for green panda bonds to be issued. And there seem to be a lot of opportunities given this disparity between the Chinese economy and the Western economies. Do you think this is really going to happen? Will we see more of this? What are you hearing? You're on mute, I'm afraid. Christine, you're on mute.
你的话筒打开。
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
谢谢刚才上的这个提问。那我觉得这个其实是back 到我们第一个部分，我们刚才谈到的就是说，鼓励更多的一带一路沿线的国家在中国市场来发行所谓的绿色熊猫债。其实是对于我们促进这个不仅是一带一路沿线国家的绿色可持续发展，那么包括来激发国内的绿色可持续发展，特别是也涉及到说推广国内的熊猫债市场，我觉得都有非常潜在的很大的潜在机会。那么这个方面呢，我想重点讲一下，就是首先呢，我们知道在疫情之后，一带一路沿线的国家普遍都会面临非常大的这个经济恢复的这种压力，与此同时呢，他们也面临非常大的这个财政上的这种短缺的空间。那么很多国家在应该讲急需外部融资。那么我们也了解到有很多一带一路在建的这种项目呢，也都是属于是在后续的融资方面会面临比较大的挑战。那么在这个过程当中呢，其实我们过去也有接触到一些沿线的国家也好，或者是企业也好，其实有这种意愿说，我是不是可以考虑通过发行在中国本土市场发行人民币计价的债券，也就是熊猫债券，来做相关的这种绿色的可持续的这种融资。那我觉得这个其实是一个非常好的提议和想法，因为其实在中国的熊猫债市场上，其实我们已经见到了这样的绿色熊猫债，但是那个应该是会集中在比如说2018年、19年那个阶段会稍微多一些。那么我们在想说，疫情之后，其实从全球的情况来看，特别是一带一路沿线国家来看，基本上对于绿色和可持续发展的这个需求是非常明确的，目标是非常明确的。那么中国也提出了要建设所谓的绿色一带一路。那么在这种共同的作用力的情况下，其实 考虑说在利用中国本土的人民币债券市场来促进为这种“一带一路”沿线的国家也好、企业也好，甚至是我们走出去的企业，建立一个长期稳定的融资渠道，我觉得其实是非常有意义和有必要性的。那么在这个方面呢，我觉得还有一些现实的工作和困难可能需要克服。我觉得一个就是关于主体信用资质的问题，因为这个里面就是说熊猫债市场，在通常意义上来讲，它是定位于吸引这种优质的境外的主体在中国国内市场来发行这个熊猫债券。那么另外一方面呢，就是说在资金使用方面，那么目前呢，熊猫债券的这个资金还是更多的被鼓励用在中国本土境内，而不是转移到国外。那么如果是我们要鼓励“一带一路”沿线的国家或者是企业在中国市场发行所谓的绿色熊猫债，那我们可能会需要在信用主体的资质，包括以及在这个资金的出入境方面做一些松动。那么这样的话，其实我觉得是能够很好的体现中国在建设绿色“一带一路”的过程当中能够起到的一种领导意义。那么同时呢，我觉得也有助于去推动整个熊猫债市场的扩容。Back to Sean.
So there's a lot that we can be done, and we've already seen one bond. I think Hungary has issued a green bond in renminbi so far, and we have a number of other issuers saying they're going to come to market this year of sovereigns. Countries like Uzbekistan or Vietnam or Italy and Spain have already announced they will be issuing green bonds. The question will we see more issued in the Chinese market going forward? So that's cheery. It sounds like it's possible. King Xian, from your perspective, what do you see as the key issues? You've got exposure to Chinese sovereign issuance. You've got exposure to green sovereigns around the world. From an investor perspective, what's got to happen next? How do we grow this? You've mentioned indices, for example. Give us your thoughts.
Yeah, I think one of the things, first of all, is for investors when they write the investment management agreement and investment guidelines, keep them neutral or broad. Doesn't have to mention whether it's any conventional bonds. So naturally, that would allow the green bonds to enter the bond indices. And so therefore, it would be naturally be forming part of the investable universe. I think this would be one of the very easy steps to achieve. Now, I think after doing this, what we need from the investor's perspective is also having a frequent issuance in the primary market, as well as a good secondary trading in the market, because this is key. Our investors, apart from having a noble objectives of investing in green bonds, at the end of the world, they also need to have a decent return, and also want to ensure that the transaction costs are kept at a reasonable level. So therefore, I think having an active participation from buy side and sell side, creating the good secondary trading liquidity in the market will be very important to ensure the success of this.
A clear thing to do. And I think the idea of repeat issuance to ensure liquidity is critical to programs. Most issuers that we've spoken to are planning to do more. Luxembourg is sure, but then Luxembourg is cash rich and is still figuring out what it does with the money because it only issued in the first place to kickstart a market. It's certainly a feature of people's intentions in this area in terms of growing a market and, of course, addressing climate change, the twin drivers of issuance in this particular area. So we can expect to see more. Some people, some issuers are reporting a greenium. That is tighter pricing on the green bond compared to vanilla bond, which is interesting. We have seen this grow in euros and US dollars. It's very clearly associated with the increased value of the green bonds in the secondary market. In downturns, green bonds tend to hold their value. They're a capital retention product. Other bonds go down in price or collapse in price, they hold their price. We even saw in March some investors reporting to us, and I'd be interested, King Xian, whether you've seen this, that the green bonds remained liquid when other bonds stopped being liquid, which I was fascinated by. Whatever, we see in the green bond market a clear bounce in terms of the value of green bonds, and that's leading to a slight tightening in primary. The German bund, when it was issued, recorded, or reported, a 1 basis point differential between the vanilla and the ordinary. That is tighter pricing on a negative interest rate bond, for goodness sake. We paid them more money to take our money in this particular case. And you also see in the secondary market, the German bund has an 8 basis points benefit. We've seen greeniums, that is slight benefits of pricing for the green bond from Thailand, Indonesia, Chile, the Netherlands, and France. Minor but material going forward based on that improved secondary market performance. And I want to say these are value investors who are doing this. This is not about sentiment. This is about the fact that they perform in a different kind of way. Of course, will we see a differential in a Chinese green bond market? I'm not sure. Lu Ying, we can't promise anyone this kind of pricing benefit because it depends on the day and other things going on. We can promise, though, investor diversification. We're seeing that very clear across the board. Is that true? Have I stepped off the mark? Is that what HSBC tells its clients?
对的，上我觉得您说的大致上是对的。我先回到说刚才那个投资人说到的这个说一个 frequent issuer 这个问题，其实说的我觉得这个是一个非常好的 point。其实我们知道很多 issuer 它 require 一个 liquid secondary trading， 所以很多他们在投资人入眼的时候都会问说你以后会不会还在发 green bond？ 那在这个政府主权债券这个领域里面我们留意到香港特区政府它今年是第2次发行 Green Bond， 但同时在去年的时候，它 commit 了一个 Green Bond Program of $100 billion。那就是说，它在未来的几年之内，它会把这个 Hong Kong dollar 100 billion 这个 quota 会用完的，所以相当于这是一个世界上第一个 government green bond program。它这个 program 是只用来是发行 green bond， 而不用来发行其他 conventional bond 的。那我们觉得在亚洲是我们这个亚洲方面的发行人，其实为这个世界set 了一个很好的先例，就是去 promise the market that they are going to be a frequent issuer going forward。那至于这个 greenium 的，你上正在刚才 mention 的，我们汇丰的研究呢，跟您得到的结论是差不多的。例如我们在汇丰亚太区，我们曾经做过一个统计，我们从2018年的6月到2020年的9月，我们曾经 underwrite 的债券，然后我们从中把 green social and sustainability bond pick 出来，然后做了一个回归分析研究，我们发现这些 GSS bond 它的这个 order book 会比普通债券大，它的这个 price tightening 会比普通债券多大概1到2个 bips， 它的新发行溢价会比普通债券稍微低一点。所以我们的研究跟这个 CBI 的 report 其实它的那个总体的大方向是非常相似的。那我们希望有更多像 State Street 有更多这样子的绿色投资人在背后的支持，那绿色债券肯定能够在这个市场这个定价方面能给发行人提供更大的优势。但是同样如果在发行人有优势的话，可能投资人那边可能就会比较难，因为我们确实能听到投资人跟我们讲，如果是一个 green bond 的话，那这个竞争可能会非常的激烈这个订单部很大的话，每一个投资人他拿到的这个 allocation 可能就不是那么的理想所以可能这个 price tightening 如果太多的话，那对于投资人来说它可能太贵了。那所以这个我感觉 pricing 这个事情呢是一个双刃剑，就是我们需要 make sure 这个 market 在一个 fair 的那个程度上面去发展，而不是一方面的投向去每一方。但我感觉这个其实做得很好，因为现在绿色债券市场已经非常大，它已经占了整个债券发行量的12%，就是在2021年1月份的话，那它不再是一个小市场，它已经从 niche go into mainstream， 所以希望这样子的话，更多的发行人更多的投资人能够让这个 market 有一个更好一个更 liquid 的一个 condition。
You know, we're at the end of a time. I just looked at the clock and it's 5 minutes to the hour. So we're going to have to wrap up. We've had a question in the panel about Asian countries are still dependent on coal. How does this relate to the green bond issuance? Look, the answer is the use of the proceeds of the green bond go to green investments and expenditures and allocation. Everyone that's a large organization has dirty investments as well as green investments. Through this, we provide preferential encouragement for those countries to shift going green. In China, we want to see a reward for the government's efforts on green economy, which are very substantial. In other countries that are thinking about this, we want to encourage them to do more, like the Chinese government, to green their economy if they come to the market. But that doesn't mean that we don't reserve the right to criticize them for their brown or their dirty expenditures, as we've seen. We saw a very interesting report by the State Council on the National Energy Agency in China a few days ago, criticizing some of their energy policies. It's an example of the discussion that's underway. How do we shift our economies going forward? Green bonds support the green part. The other part still needs to be fixed. There's work to be done. Final comments, please. Christine, what's your advice to people going forward on this? And then Guojun after you. Sorry, Christine, final words, advice to the market going forward. And are you ready to provide verification for Chinese sovereign bonds going overseas?
So I'll be first, or Professor Anne?
You will be first, okay.
Okay, go ahead. Go, Christine. Professor Anne next.
Okay, thank you. 其实从我们刚才讲的，其实是我们想说是目前，其实我们觉得对中国来讲是一个非常好的时机来考虑发行一个绿色主权债的一个情况。这个从几个方面讲吧。第一个方面，我们刚才提到的就是说，如果我们从国际政治的格局来讲，其实中国现在处在一个非常特殊的境遇当中。那么目前中美之间的这个我们讲摩擦也好，或者是对峙也好，那么未来呢，其实气候合作是中美之间少数可以保持沟通的一个重要的合作领域。那么另外一方面，我们也看到，就是说在中欧投资协定的签订当中，其实也有关于巴黎协定的一种遵守的相关的承诺的这些方面的相关的这种规定。所以我想我们来看呢，其实从国际的政治的战略和格局上来看，其实从外部环境来看，现在中国是处于一个非常就是大势所趋，是要来发行相关的这种贴标主权债券的这样一种情况。那么另外一个方面呢，我们觉得就是说从推动国内绿色债券市场发展来看，就是说主权发行相关的这个贴标主权债券也是具有非常重要的推动意义。那么我们可以看到，现在中国国内的绿债市场发展，我们可以发现的趋势上来讲，还是更多的可能是来自于这种self-driven 的这种自下而上的，那么可能来自于某一些地方政府，或者是来自某一些这个局部的这个监管机构。那么我们还是希望说，如果中国政府能够以这种发行贴标主权债券的这种市场化的方式，而不是一种监管的这种方式来对这个市场做出示范效应的话，那么它对于整个市场的这个激发和扩容，应该讲会起到一个非常大的一个示范意义。那么其实对于中国发行这些贴标主权债券来讲，我觉得不仅可以考虑国内，那么也可以考虑像香港这种离岸债券市场。那么我们知道，中国其实在香港离岸市场连续发布很多次的这种离岸的主权债券，那么它的效果是非常好的。那么还有一个点呢，就是说我们知道中国在制定自己的这个绿色债券支持项目的目录，这是一个新的版本。那么如果我们的这个中国的贴标主权债券能够配合我们这个新的标准的出台，同步在国际市场也好，在中国国内债券市场也好来发行这个相关的债券，我们觉得它会在很大程度上树立中国的能够贴近于国际的这种绿色的标准。所以其实从以上几个角度来讲，都是非常具有重要意义的。那么还有一个方面就是说，中国发行贴标主权债券还能够在推动我们的这个金融市场对外开放，特别是能够吸引来自发达国家的这种绿色机构投资者来讲，也是具有非常大的这种示范意义和推动意义的。那么好，我就讲这些，谢谢。Thank you, Sean.
Really good points. Really good points. Thank you so much. Guojun, over to you. What's your advice about prospects? Go.
Okay, thank you. I speak Chinese, okay?
实
际上我觉得刚才的几个嘉宾，包括张，他其实对于中国发行贴标绿色主权债券的背景和意义做了非常深度的阐释。我想谈这么几点啊，一个就是现在呢，就是我们实际上 实质率，就是我们贴标率和实质率，实际上它实质率的债券没有做强制发行前的认证，它重实质而轻形式，实际上也起到了一定的绿色项目投资的效果。那么据统计呢，我们国家26个省市共发行了，这是以前那个数据啊，116支实质率的地方政府债，规模达到1769亿。实际上呢，我就是对于整个的绿色低碳发展，这个也是未来的趋势。第二个呢，大家可能清楚，就是去年7月份的时候呢，中国成立了国家的绿色发展基金，是875亿。我们的绿色基金研究团队呢，也积极推动了它的设计和落地的工作，放在上海长三角。那么现在呢，我们可以看到地方的应该算是就是绿色债券市场，尤其是政府债券市场是地方先行。那么地方的改革来推动中央的一些实质性的一个推动。那么如果有一支绿色国债或绿色主权债券，今年能够推动的话，无疑对于整个市场的发展会起到一个非常好的一个引领的作用。第三个呢，就是对于刚才几个嘉宾提到了定价机制、收益率曲线，以及对于发行人可以降低融资成本，那么投资人他的激励机制在哪里？那么无论是从他的 ESG 标准、税收的优惠，以及他在金融市场的一个融资，未来的一些就是相关的金融产品创新的融资，应该得到各个相关的部门的一些支持。我觉得这是给投资人提供一个非常好的一个这样的一个创新和投资融资的机制。第四层面呢，刚才张博士也提到了，就是香港我们认为呢，包括中国的自贸区的发展，以及粤港澳大湾区、长三角京津冀一体化，这个绿色金融的离岸中心的建设是非常重要的，包括北京要推动自贸区的发展。那么无论是熊猫债还是这种跨境的，以及这种离岸中心的建设，对于我们的绿色债券市场以及主权市场的发展一定会提供非常大的空间。那么我想呢，就是无论是绿色债券还是绿色基金还是气候债券等等这些，其实我们都是为后代而努力，为了更好的一个功在当代，利在千秋。我也希望呢，在明年的时候，实际上我们明年1月份在开这个会的时候，我们应该为绿色主权债券在2021年的推进和发行而庆贺，也为我们中国，无论是中国还是全球的这个绿色主权债券市场发展，还有影响力投资、责任投资这样的合作。最重要一点呢，刚才我忽略掉了啊，就是绿色债券的发行和绿色基金的投资，它更多的是注重绿色低碳技术。我们也真心的希望呢，在这方面，除了绿色金融之外，就绿色低碳技术要加强“一带一路”及全球的合作，无论是雾霾治理还是清洁能源、新能源、环境保护等等这些降碳，希望能够善你的团队希望能够给我们带来除了这个绿色债券之外的更多的新鲜的力量。非常感谢您。Hi.
I look forward to our celebration in a year's time of all the further progress. King Xian,
Celebration party.
King Xian, your advice, is this going to work? What would you be saying if you were talking to Ministry of Finance officials, King Xian, from State Street Global's perspective now?
Right.
Okay.
Thanks, Guajun. King Xian, go ahead.
Right. I think this would work. I think this is an effort that requires collective effort from market participants, both from the issuer, from the market making, and the investor side. And I think if we stay the course and continues to be focused and remain committed, I think we see a very bright prospects of achieving this. So I'm very encouraged to hear that there's a lot of in-depth focus and discussions on various aspects of this green bond investing.
Fantastic. Thank you. Lu Ying, I have to say also, thank you to HSBC for supporting the development of this report. Final words.
谢谢Sean，是我们的荣幸能够把这个这么 informative 的一个 report 带到这个市场。那其他的嘉宾也说了很多了，我就不重复了。那就希望在2021我们能够有更多的专家、更多的朋友，还有更多的无论是买方卖方的 的机构参与到这个绿色金融来，不一定是 bond， 也可能是 loan， 不一定是 for institutional， 也可以是 for retail， 不一定是 for 中国，也可以说去亚太或者其他地区。那希望我们2021会是更好的一年，更绿的一年，也希望大家能够早日从这个疫情中咱们恢复过来，然后也先祝大家新春快乐，春节愉快。
Absolutely. Happy Spring Festival, everyone. Remember, we have a job to do to green our economies fast, to address climate change fast, to deliver on the vision of the European leaders, where I'm working at the moment, on the Chinese leaders, President Xi Jinping, who has committed to aggressive targets for green the economy, but also the same targets for the 110 other countries and soon to be USA in that area. We have work to do. Sovereign green bond issuance is part of that. Thank you everyone for joining us. This session was recorded. That is, if you would like to share it with your friends, you will be able to go to climatebonds.net/webinars and locate the recording and share it around. It'll also be available on the Climate Bonds YouTube channel if you're lucky enough to get hold of that. And we will promote it in our WeChat channel of Climate Bonds. So you can share, please do share with all your friends. Grow green, everyone, but be safe while you do it until this pandemic scourge has gone. Build back better. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to our fantastic panelists. It's been a great session. Look forward to progress this year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
感谢大家。